Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. I wasn't sure whether to include this book on my Wednesdays or my sequel Sunday videos because of how the book is set up. Because of the way that it's set up, I leaned more toward doing this as a Wednesday video, which is why you're watching this on a Wednesday. The book is The Vegetarian by Han King, and this is the front cover of the book. Young Hai and her husband are ordinary people. He is an office worker with moderate ambitions and mild manners. She is an uninspired but dutiful wife. The acceptable flatline of their marriage is interrupted when young Hai, seeking a more plant-like existence, decides to become a vegetarian, prompted by grotesque recurring nightmares. In South Korea, where vegetarianism is almost unheard of and societal mores are strictly obeyed, young Hai's decision is a shocking act of subversion. Her passive rebellion manifests in ever more bizarre and frightening forms, leading her bland husband to self-justified acts of sexual sadism. His cruelties drive her towards attempted suicide and hospitalization. She unknowingly captivates her sister's husband, a video artist. She becomes the focus of his increasingly erotic and unhinged artworks, while spiraling further and further into her fantasies of abandoning her fleshly prison. This is split into 3 sections, which are kind of like 3 different stories, but it's all connected. The first part is The Vegetarian, the second part is Mongolian Mark, and the third part is Flaming Trees. The first bit is the bit that I think most people have heard of. That's the bit that I mainly hear people talking about, the very first section, where you're seeing it from Mr. Chung's point of view, and he's talk about his relationship with his wife, and a specific time when his wife becomes a vegetarian very suddenly. It's young Hai's story but told by other people. In the first section, Mr. Chung basically comes out and just says he considers his wife to be kind of unremarkable, and he explains that he wasn't even attracted to her, and they kind of just like settled into a life together. It's just like, it feels like he doesn't actually love her and just thought that they'd just be a good fit. I don't know how common that kind of relationship is in South Korea. It's Young Ho's story throughout it all, and in the first book you kind of got the husband's point of view, and you are also given small sections in italics which seem to be related to the dream that Young Hai had that made her turn into a vegetarian. And so it's looking at kind of like what she thinks is going on. If you go into this book thinking that it's about having a vegetarian lifestyle, you're completely wrong, because the way I've heard this book described was a woman's choice to turn vegetarian affect her entire family in a crazy way. And it's just like, that feels like a very pathetic attempt to describe this book because that doesn't describe this book at all, actually. It's very dark. I put some trigger warnings out there for sexual assault and rape. It's fairly prominent in the first book, a little bit in the second. In the third, it doesn't have that at all. But the first and the second sections do have sexual assault in them. And in the first book, you do see the husband refer to himself forcing himself upon his wife, which was really, really hard to read. So I just want to put that out there for people so they can make a decision by themselves over whether they want to read that or not. But it does provide a context to how traditional he is and how he thinks that his wife is there to serve him. And when Young Hai becomes a vegetarian and she's there going, I had a dream, and nobody seems to want to ask her what she actually dreamt, which I found really strange, because it's just like, oh, you had a dream, like, I want to know, like, what happened in the dream, what was it about that dream that made you decide to change your diet, because I would be fascinated to learn about that. Admittedly, in the italic sections where you do feel like you're getting a slight explanation for those dreams, yeah, it's kind of weird and disturbing, but the whole story is kind of weird and disturbing, but I kind of liked it. It was dark, and I must admit I do like quite dark stories, but I would also say it was quite weird. I've never read a book like this before, but as I said, if you're thinking it's about someone just becoming a vegetarian and how that affects themselves and their family, that's not what this book is, because the fact is, her reasons for becoming a vegetarian are slightly strange, and also she's not doing it properly, because you realise that the way her diet has changed means that she is, as confirmed in the 3rd section, she becomes anorexic. Disordered eating is another trigger for this book. But if she's not looking after herself, and there's a moment in the 1st section, The Vegetarian, where she's at dinner with her family. So she's at dinner with her husband and her sister and her brother-in-law and her parents, and she's there going, I'm not eating meat anymore. And her whole family's up in arms going like, why are you not eating meat? Why are you not eating meat? Like, it's like the most bizarre thing in the world to decide to change her diet like that, which is definitely not the problem in this book. The idea of her becoming a vegetarian, that is not the problem at all. But her family react in such an insane way to her choice, to the point where it starts a fight, like a physical fight, where her dad basically slaps her across the face and tries to force feed her meat, and I'm just like, God, this is not the way to handle this. This is not the way to handle this. But you realise that it goes so much deeper than just this dream and the idea that she's just decided not to eat meat anymore. It goes so much deeper than that. And I'm impressed how well this secret has been kept. Now, I'm sure there'll be other people out there who are just like, I know exactly where this ended up, and I haven't even read it, but just like, I hadn't. I heard so many people talk about this book and the story, and none of it refers to what happens at the end of the story in that final section, which is Flaming Trees. But yeah, so you've got that whole vegetarian section where you're looking at Young Hai. She's had this dream. She decides she's not going to eat meat anymore. She throws out all the meat in the house. She basically has decided that her husband is going to be a vegetarian when he's at home. And he's acting like it's the end of the world because he has to have one meal a day that doesn't have meat in it. But I think it just tells you how insane the whole family is. You've got Mr. Chung's reaction in regards to the idea that, oh my god, I have to eat meat for one less meal a day, even though I cancel eat at work. She realises that she can't actually continue a relationship with him because she just smells the meat on him when he has eaten meat. The second section, the Mongolian mark, you've got the husband of Young Hai's sister, In Hai. So you never really get his name, it's done from his point of view, so it's the brother-in-law. He's just referred to as brother-in-law throughout the whole thing. And he is an artist, he does video art, and he imagines a scene in his head of two people painted in flowers making love, and he's just like, I need to make this a real thing. And so he's there thinking like, who can I get to be models for this? And there's a bizarre reason, he goes straight to his sister-in-law, Young Hai. And at this point, this is like a few months after the event of The Vegetarian. Young Hai and Mr. Chung have divorced at this point. They finally divorced. Young Hai is living by herself, and she has come to a point where she feels very much within herself. Her sister In Hai checks up on her periodically, but for the majority of the time Young Hai is still living by this vegetarian lifestyle, even though she's not doing it properly. She's not getting all the nutrients she needs, and she is severely underweight, which does lead in to the next part, which is Flaming Trees, where she's actually admitted to a mental hospital for anorexia. God, so much happens across these books. The Mongolian mark is done through the point of view of the brother-in-law. He becomes obsessed with this idea of the Mongolian mark. He finds out that his sister-in-law actually has a Mongolian mark, where it's supposed to be that a lot of people kind of fade away. It's kind of like a birthmark that's supposed to fade away after a certain amount of time, so you don't see many adults with this mark. But he gets this idea, like, that this Mongolian mark needs to be involved in this video art that he wants to make, the idea of making a flower out of the mark. And yeah, so that's the point when he's just like, I want to get Young Hai in this, and I want to paint her body, and then I'm going to paint somebody else's body. I'm going to make them make love on camera. And it's just like, oh God, where is this going? And he's just there going, this isn't pornography, this is art. But then even the guy that he gets involved in it realises that he can't make love to Young Hai, even if it is for art, because he's just like, no, I feel like I'm making porn at this point, so no, I'm not going to do that. Everything that he does video is simulated, but then the brother-in-law kind of urges them to actually do it for real. And he's just there going, well, Young Hai would do it at this point, but the guy who's gotten involved is just like, no, that's where I draw my line. Like, I am not doing this anymore, and he runs off. And yeah, it just leads to a very, very inappropriate relationship between the brother-in-law and Young Hai, which then leads into Flaming Trees. Basically, in Hai, Young Hai's sister catches her husband with Young Hai in Young Hai's apartment when she goes to check up on them. And she basically accuses them of completely losing their minds. And I'm missing out so much. I'm not completely spoiling this. But then that leads into Flaming Trees, where Young Hai has officially been taken in to get help for her anorexia, because it's gotten to the point when she's not eating anything. This started off as her going off meat, and then it gets to the point where she's just like, no, I just need air now. And you realise that this isn't about becoming a vegetarian at all. Whatever is going on with Young Hai, she is determined to see it through, and it's gotten to the point where you're not completely sure what her end goal is. You are later told what her end game is, and by the end you realise that it seems like In Hai has finally realised what her sister is doing, and almost tries to help her, because in Flaming Trees, Young Hai, she's been admitted, they keep sedating her and trying to force feed her, because they're just like, she's not putting on any weight. You know, she's not at a point when we can release her. I think there is a point when they try to release her, and then everything goes wrong, and Young Hai tries to run away, and they have to bring her back, and it's just like, no, this isn't working, you know, we need to figure out another way to deal with this, because Young Hai is not well. She has stopped eating entirely. We can barely get her to drink anything. Just seeing how this all plays out through these 3 sections, it's just like, are they chapters? Are they individual stories? This is why I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this as a series Sunday or not. The book itself isn't actually that long. It says it's 230 pages in total on my iPad, and I kind of went between reading this on my iPad and my phone. So you've got all these 3 different sections going across 230 pages, or just under 230 pages really, and it just says target audience adult. The genre is general fiction. It gives you absolutely nothing in regards to what the actual content of this story is. It is disturbing. I mean, there's a tagline on here. It says it's a novel about shame, desire, and our faltering attempts to understand others from one imprisoned body to another. As I said, it is disturbing. And the fact that it all starts with Young Hai having a dream that just puts her off the idea of eating animals and eating meat. And it feels like it's more than just vegetarian. Because, as I said, you know, it isn't about her being a vegetarian. It's about something else entirely, which is, you find out about at the very end of Flaming Trees, and you realise that becoming a vegetarian wasn't the issue, really, for Young Hai. Her family's reaction is completely insane. The idea of it being done for like health things is alright, but the idea of somebody just saying that they don't want to eat meat because they don't want to eat an animal, that just seems really bizarre. And it's just like, yeah, for some people that might seem a bit strange. Like, I personally am just like, as long as you're doing it in a healthy way and you're still getting the nutrients you need, your diet should be none of anybody else's business, really. When Young Hai and Mr. Chung turn up for that dinner with the family, but to be fair, there's actually a meeting as well that Mr. Chung decides to bring her on after she's had this dream. She said that she's going to become a vegetarian, and he purposely takes her out for dinner for work and is just like, can you just act normal for one night? But the entire meal is full of meat. She barely eats anything, and all the his co-workers looking at her and going, oh, why are you not eating? She's there going, oh, I'm a vegetarian. And they're all acting like it's a completely crazy concept of the idea of her not eating meat. Which, to be fair, for life in Korea, I don't know how common it is to have a vegetarian or vegan diet. Admittedly, I don't know. Whereas like the UK and the US and stuff, it's becoming very, very normal. Well, it is normal to have other diets. You know, we do have people who are gluten-free, who are vegetarian, who are vegan, who have different diets based on their own needs, their own choices. Reading this from this point of view, because this ebook was released in 2015. Yeah, I'm not completely sure when the original book was actually published. It was first published in 2007, and it was based on the author's short story The Fruit of My Woman, which was written in 1997. Yeah, the description of the vegetarian on Wikipedia It says, it tells the story of Young Hai, a part-time graphic artist and homemaker whose decision to stop eating meat after a bloody nightmarish dream about human cruelty leads to devastating consequences in her personal and familial life. Having read all of it, that is so deceiving for what this story actually is. It is so misleading. It was translated by Deborah Smith, so its first publication date was October 2007 in South Korea, and then it made over to the UK in January 2015 and the US in February 2016. It's only over the past couple of years that I've really started hearing people talking about this, probably because of its adaptation and things. But yeah, I feel like it was 2020 that I really started hearing more people hear about this. I think it's probably because of lockdown, but yeah, it's disturbing, it's weird, and the title, Vegetarian, is misleading, as is most of the descriptions of this plot. But it's kind of fascinating when you see where it goes, and the fact that you've got two sections where you're seeing from a male point of view, and then the third one you're looking from the sister's point of view. But yeah, so each section has its own reaction to the events of the previous and the current moment. So in the first section, Vegetarian, you see him looking back on his earlier relationship with her and how it led to the moment that they are in, and then you have those little sections where you're finding out about the dream that she's had, but seeing his point of view and how he thinks his wife should be. So there is kind of a bit of misogyny in there and sexism with how he feels like his wife should behave. And obviously she has every right to do and live how she wants. But then as her diet gets worse and you realise that even though it was a dream about cruelty that changed her opinions on what she wanted to eat, it goes a lot deeper than that. It's so much more than just being a vegetarian, and you realise just how disturbed Young Hai actually is. The fact that you see the first two sections of the male gaze observing her is very interesting, because you've got two men who have this idea in their heads, and so the way that Young Hai is treated by her husband and by her brother-in-law is very, very sexist. And seeing in the third section how her sister deals with her just kind of turns it all on its head. Yeah, I feel like I've said everything and nothing. But I did find it a very, very fascinating story. Would I read it again? Probably not. But I am glad that I read it. The Vegetarian by Han King. So that is the front cover of the book. I went into this book not having read the blurb, so I didn't know what was coming. And I felt that was an incredible way to read this, not knowing where that was going. If you haven't heard about this book, please do not read the blurb. Do not read to the end of that blurb. Because going into this book blind, just having known what I've heard people talk about, made it that much more an incredible read, because I didn't know where Young Hai was going. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time in another video. But if you have read this book and you do know the ending, and you have any thoughts and queries, have a little chat with me, or have a chat amongst yourselves, because I'd love to hear what other people thought of the very end of that final section. When I realised what was going on, I was completely fascinated and disturbed. Don't be afraid to talk and chat in the comments, because I just thought it was fascinating. But yeah, so love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!